Things got worse when my husband and I decided to buy our first home together. He contributed financially to the purchase, but my mother-in-law took every chance to criticize my decorating choices. She even gave us decorations that clashed horribly with our style. Given how much I had hoped for a cozy and beautiful home, her actions felt intentional and hurtful. Her behavior only escalated as she tried to create tension between my husband and me by spreading false stories about me. Despite the pain, I convinced myself it would all work itself out, hoping things would improve on their own. But eventually, I knew I had to stand up for myself. In an effort to repair our strained relationship, I invited her over for dinner. I worked hard to prepare a meal based on my husband's suggestions, hoping to make peace. Unfortunately, she hardly touched the food and immediately began criticizing it, comparing it to something unfit for animals. Her words were a sharp reminder of how little respect she had for me, and she made it clear she didn't think I could even cook. Even though I explained that the dinner was meant as a gesture of peace, not as a culinary showcase, she dismissed it entirely. She continued to belittle me, suggesting that marrying her son wasn't even an accomplishment in her eyes. The evening became increasingly uncomfortable, not just for me but for everyone at the table. My husband, instead of standing by me, remained neutral and suggested the situation was something the ladies should work out. His lack of support left me feeling isolated and disrespected in my own home. This experience underscored just how tough my relationship with my mother-in-law had become. It became clear that I needed to establish some boundaries if I was going to maintain my sense of dignity and peace in this family dynamic. When issues arose, Brian often urged me to let things go, suggesting I simply overlook my mother's behavior. One such instance stands out from my aunt's birthday party. She had transformed her basement into a creative space where guests could paint and enjoy wine and snacks, a lovely idea meant to promote relaxation and fun. Things started off well when I greeted my aunt enthusiastically, "Happy birthday, Auntie. This setup is amazing, combining painting with wine is brilliant. Thank you, dear. It's just something to help everyone relax and have fun," she replied, clearly pleased with the response. But my mood shifted when I found out my mother-in-law was also there. "I didn't expect Diana to be here," I remarked, somewhat uneasy. "Oh, Diana and I get along great. I love her sense of style. Sorry I didn't mention I invited her. I know there's been some tension, but I thought this might be a step toward making things better. After all, she's family," my aunt explained, understanding my discomfort with Diana, who often treated me with thinly veiled disdain. I sighed. "She can be so difficult with that attitude." "I know, but just try to enjoy the evening," my aunt said, offering me some comfort. The night became more awkward when my mother-in-law, wearing an eye-catching, and somewhat inappropriate, shirt, accidentally smeared paint on herself after indulging in too much wine. My aunt and mother rushed to help, and I joined them reluctantly, not wanting to leave my mom alone to handle Diana. The situation became even more uncomfortable when I overheard my mother-in-law talking about Gabriel, an old school rival of my husband's, now romantically involved with her. Gabriel had a history of mistreating me, and Brian was well aware of it. Hearing Diana praise him for his transformation and how he now treated her so lavishly only made things more complicated. Brian's reluctance to stand up to his mother left me feeling unsupported, and I realized it was up to me to speak my truth. Waiting for him to take action wasn't an option anymore. Determined to handle things on my own, I knew it was time for a candid conversation with Diana. The situation wasn't going to resolve itself without a clear discussion, and I was ready to establish the boundaries I needed to protect my peace and dignity. "Hello, I'm Victoria. From the start, my relationship with my mother-in-law has been difficult. She's always had a way of making me feel unwelcome, as though she didn't see me as the right match for her son." Hello everyone, I'm Victoria, and if you're reading this, you've probably experienced some difficult family dynamics at one point or another. For me, my relationship with my mother-in-law, Diana, has been a constant source of tension from the very beginning. It always felt like she was subtly undermining me, making it clear she didn't believe I was the right match for her son. The discomfort was palpable, and though I did my best to tolerate her behavior, it never quite felt like I belonged in her eyes. Things only worsened when Brian and I decided to take a big step in our relationship, buying our first home together. While Brian contributed financially, I took the lead on a lot of the decision-making, including the decor. I was so excited about creating a space that felt like our own, something beautiful and meaningful. But Diana seemed determined to make this an uphill battle. She didn't miss an opportunity to criticize my choices, pointing out flaws in my taste, and offering her own decorations that never quite fit with our style. I remember vividly receiving a set of wall hangings she gave us, tacky and mismatched, right when I was trying to finalize our home's aesthetic. I couldn't help but wonder if she was intentionally sabotaging my vision. It felt like she was on a mission to undermine me at every turn. The situation only grew more complicated when Diana began trying to create rifts between Brian and me. She would tell him things I supposedly said or did, things that were either exaggerated or outright false, and each time he would believe her. I would watch as he grew distant, questioning me over things I hadn't even done. It hurt, but I tried to hold my tongue, convinced that with time, the misunderstandings would resolve themselves. I didn't want to make things worse. But there came a breaking point. I realized I couldn't just sit back and let her undermine my relationship any longer. I had to take charge of the situation, not just for myself, but for my marriage. I decided to invite her over for dinner, hoping that a calm, peaceful evening might help smooth things over. I worked hard on preparing a meal based on Brian's suggestions of her favorite foods, trying to extend an olive branch in a way that felt genuine. I wanted to be the bigger person. The dinner, however, was nothing short of a disaster. From the moment Diana walked in, I could feel her critical gaze on me. She barely touched the food, immediately comparing it to something she deemed unfit for even animals. The word stung. It was a slap in the face, especially after I had gone out of my way to make her feel welcome. She didn't hold back her disdain, continuously making jabs about my cooking skills, and it became clear that my efforts were completely lost on her. She wasn't interested in peace. She was interested in belittling me. When I tried to explain that the dinner was simply a gesture to bridge the gap between us, she dismissed my explanation with a casual wave. She even went as far as implying that being married to Brian wasn't an accomplishment in her eyes, that it wasn't enough for her standards. The dismissiveness and condescension in her tone made my blood boil, but I kept my composure, unwilling to let her provoke me further. The night dragged on in an uncomfortable silence, her incessant negative remarks hanging in the air like a thick fog, and to my dismay, Brian didn't step in. He remained neutral, saying it was something the ladies should sort out. That moment felt like a betrayal, as if my feelings and needs weren't worth defending. I was left to navigate this toxic dynamic on my own, and I felt more isolated than ever. That evening made me realize something crucial. I needed more than just tolerance. I needed understanding, support, and boundaries, something that was missing in my relationship with Diana, and unfortunately, from Brian too. It was becoming painfully clear that if I didn't set those boundaries, I would lose myself in this family dynamic. Things didn't improve when we attended my aunt's birthday celebration shortly after. My aunt had transformed her basement into a cozy, creative space for painting and wine, a beautiful concept meant to foster relaxation and fun. I had been looking forward to it, but my excitement was short-lived when I saw who had arrived. "Happy birthday, Auntie. This setup is amazing. Combining painting with wine is genius," I said, trying to keep the enthusiasm alive as I entered the basement. My aunt smiled warmly. "Thank you, dear. It's just a little something to help everyone unwind." But the air changed when I saw Diana. I didn't expect to see her here, I confessed, a knot forming in my stomach. "Oh, Diana and I have become friends," my aunt replied, seemingly unaware of the tension between us. "I adore her sense of style." I thought I'd extend the invite. "I know there's been tension, but I'm hoping this can be a step toward mending things." I sighed, feeling the familiar weight of frustration. "She can make things difficult with her attitude," I muttered under my breath. "I understand," my aunt said, sensing my discomfort. "Just try to enjoy the evening, okay? Don't let her bother you." It was hard to take my aunt's advice, especially when Diana's behavior seemed to escalate. She was wearing an eye-catching, yet oddly inappropriate shirt that stood out even more as she indulged in one too many glasses of wine. Before long, she had spilled paint on herself, and my mom and aunt rushed over to help. Begrudgingly, I joined them in cleaning up, though every minute felt like a forced act of politeness. The discomfort reached a peak when I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. Diana was boasting about Gabriel, My husband's old school rival, who was now romantically involved with her. Gabriel had never been kind to me, quite the opposite, actually, and his behavior was something Brian had always known about. Yet, Diana spoke about him as if he were some kind of hero. She gleamed as she described how Gabriel had transformed and how he treated her with such care. The irony wasn't lost on me. Brian's rival had become his mother's lover, and I was left feeling like an outsider. It wasn't just the situation with Gabriel that left me reeling, it was Brian's refusal to take any action. His reluctance to confront his mother or defend me in moments like these was becoming unbearable. I realized that if I wanted any peace, I had to take matters into my own hands. I couldn't wait for Brian to be the mediator anymore. That night, I decided it was time for a frank discussion with Diana. She had crossed too many lines, and I was no longer willing to sit back and endure the toxic atmosphere she was creating. I had to stand up for myself, for my relationship, and for my well-being. It was clear that if this was ever going to get better, I had to set boundaries, not just for Diana, but for Brian too. The realization hit me hard. I couldn't change Diana, but I could change how I responded to her, and it was time to reclaim my peace, my dignity, and my voice in this family.